So when most of us hear yoga today, you probably picture, yoga studios, maybe some very flexible poses.
That's the common image now.
But the actual story of how this ancient practice got to the West is, well, it's really fascinating. Lots of twists you might not expect.
Absolutely. It wasn't just an overnight thing. It has this really specific, interesting history behind its journey into the modern wellness world.
Exactly. And that's what we're digging into today. You shared some great sources looking at yoga's journey, especially through the 20th century.
Yeah, try to piece together that evolution.
So our mission really is to understand those key moments, the influences, the figures, and how it transformed into the global thing it is now. We've got historical accounts, some sociology in there too.
A good mix to work with.
So where does this story really start to pick up steam in the West?
Well, the sources really point to a specific moment, 1893, Swami Vivekananda's speech in Chicago.
Ah, the world's parliament of religions.
That's the one. It seems like a genuine turning point.
It really does. And he wasn't talking about exercise routines back then, was he?
Not primarily, no. He framed yoga as a science of the mind, something offering universal spiritual insights.
That framing feels really important for how it was first received here, like philosophical, not just physical.
Totally. By positioning it that way as a system for mental, spiritual growth, he connected with this existing Western interest in, well, different philosophies, Eastern thought.
And it wasn't only the speeches, right? He wrote that book, Raja Yoga.
Published in 1896. Actually wrote it in Manhattan, interestingly enough.
Wow. So that must have been huge for making these core yogic ideas understandable for Westerners.
Oh, definitely. Raja Yoga essentially translated key texts, like the Yoga Sutras, the foundational stuff, the philosophy, the practices into English. It really opened it up.
Made it less mysterious.
Exactly.
And it landed on fertile ground, it seems. The sources mentioned that people were already curious, right? Like the Transcendentalists, Emerson, and those guys.
That's a really important context. There was already this sort of intellectual searching going on, people looking beyond traditional Western frameworks. Vivekananda's message resonated with that.
So there was an audience ready, in a way.
In certain circles, absolutely.
Yeah.
And you also mentioned the Theosophical Society.
Yeah, they pop up too. Did they help pave the way?
Seems like they played a part, yeah. By promoting interest in sort of esoteric ideas, including bits of Eastern philosophy, they helped create a climate where something like yoga could get a hearing.
Okay, so we've got this initial introduction, quite spiritual, quite philosophical, but then things start to shift towards the physical in the early 20th century.
Right. This is where it gets really interesting in terms of blending traditions.
How so?
You get figures like Sri Yogendra and Swami Vivekananda. They're seen as pioneers in combining Hatha Yoga, that's the branch more focused on physical postures, with ideas from Western gymnastics.
Gymnastics, really?
Yeah. They even set up yoga institutes in India. Yogendra in 1918, Vivekananda in 1924, kind of formalizing this approach.
That's a surprising mix. And they weren't just teaching movements, were they? Something about scientific study.
Exactly. They started doing scientific studies on yoga's health benefits, measuring things.
Ah, so that helped legitimize it in Western eyes, making it seem less mystical, more physical health-oriented.
Precisely. It resonated with the Western scientific mindset and this growing interest in physical fitness and well-being.
And then there's the sun salutation, Surya Namaskar. That comes in around the 1920s.
Yeah, introduced by the Raja of Ond, Pawanrao Srinivasrao Pantpratinidhi. And the sources suggest it really reflects those Western fitness trends at the time. An early example of adapting and blending.
So yoga already changing, absorbing influences.
Definitely. It's not static.
Okay, fast forward a bit. Mid-20th century. When we talk about modern yoga, one name always comes up. Tirumalai Krishnamacharya.
Often called the father of modern yoga.
What made him so central?
Well, Krishnamacharya, teaching down in Mysore, India, really leaned into incorporating more dynamic, almost gymnastic-style movements into yoga. He developed these flowing sequences focusing on strength, flexibility, breath control, things very characteristic of many styles today.
And he taught some incredibly famous students who then spread things further.
Absolutely. His lineage is hugely influential.
Well, let's talk about B.K.S. Iyengar first. His name is practically a brand of yoga now.
Right. Iyengar Yoga. His big contribution was this incredible focus on precise alignment in the postures, the asanas, and the use of props, blocks, straps, blankets to help people achieve that alignment safely and effectively.
And his book, Light on Yoga from '66, The sources say it sold, what, over 3 million copies?
It's staggering, isn't it? It just became the go-to guide for asanas for so many people in the West. The detail, the photos, it made the physical practice incredibly accessible.
A real game changer for accessibility.
No doubt.
Then there's K-Patapijay, Ashtanga Vinyasa Yoga. That's quite different, right? Much more intense.
Yeah, Ashtanga is known for its vigorous, set sequences of postures, all linked by breath, the vinyasa flow. It's physically demanding, and it heavily influenced the power yoga styles that came later.
And Joy started teaching in the West himself in the 70s.
He did, yeah, which really helped popularize that specific dynamic style directly.
Okay, and Indra Devi, she gets called the First Lady of Yoga. What was her angle?
Her story is fascinating. She was actually teaching Hollywood stars back in the late 1940s. Think Greta Garbo, Gloria Swanson.
Wow, so she brought yoga into popular culture, gave it a bit of glamour.
Absolutely. That kind of exposure was massive for its profile.
And Krishnamacharya's son, TKV Desikachar, he took a different path again.
He did. Desikachar really emphasized adapting yoga to the individual, more of a therapeutic focus, tailoring the practice for personal health and well-being rather than a one-size-fits-all system. He founded the Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandalam in Chennai.
So making it more personalized, more about healing.
Exactly, highlighting that aspect.
Yeah. And the sources briefly touch on others too, like Bikram Choudhury, Bikram Yoga, the hot room stuff, and Swami Sivananda, another influential lineage.
Right, so you see by the mid-century, it's really branching out. Different teachers, different styles, different emphases are emerging.
Okay, so that sets the stage. Then we hit the late 20th century, the 1960s, and things seem to explode culturally. The counterculture movement.
Absolutely pivotal. You had this widespread disillusionment, especially among young people in the West, questioning mainstream society, looking for alternatives.
Spiritual alternatives, different ways of living.
Exactly. And Eastern philosophies, including yoga and meditation, really fit that search.
And nothing symbolizes that more than the Beatles going to Rishikesh in '68, right? Visiting Maharishi Mahesh Yogi.
Oh, that was huge. Suddenly it was front-page news everywhere. Yoga, meditation.
Okay.
It became linked with the Beatles, with the whole counterculture vibe.
Put it right in the mainstream consciousness.
Massively so. It gave it this incredible cultural cachet.
And it wasn't just celebrities. You also had the hippie trail, right? People traveling to India.
And bringing back what they learned.
Yeah.
Yoga practices were definitely part of that. It spread more organically, too, through those personal experiences.
Person-to-person sharing.
Yeah.
It's interesting. The sources link yoga's appeal then to this idea of postmodern anxiety. Like the world felt chaotic, fast-changing.
And yoga offered a tool, perhaps? A way to find some inner stability, manage the stress of it all. That's the sociological take, anyway.
Makes sense.
So.
And then by the 70s, it also starts aligning neatly with the growing fitness and wellness boom in the West.
Right. It wasn't just spiritual seeking anymore. The physical benefits, the stress reduction. Yoga ticked those boxes, too.
So it became part of the health conversation.
Exactly. It offered both physical conditioning and mental calm, which was increasingly appealing.
And that's when you start seeing more dedicated yoga studios, teacher trainings popping up, books, TV shows, even videos later on.
Yeah, the whole infrastructure starts to build up, making it much easier for anyone to access it, learn it, practice it.
Okay, let's dig into how yoga itself changed as it settled in the West. The sources mention something pretty surprising, the influence of Western gymnastics, like Swedish and Danish drills.
It is surprising, isn't it? But scholars like Mark Singleton have really brought this to light. There was this existing physical culture movement in the West focused on, like, natural fitness. And photography played a big role in showing poses.
So ideas got mixed?
Yeah.
Gymnastics moves crept into yoga?
It seems so. Certain ways of moving, certain sequences. There was a blending. The lines weren't always clear-cut.
And the sun salutation is brought up again as an example of that mix. Indian postures plus Western movement patterns.
Exactly. It's often cited as a prime example of this hybridity, this cross-pollination of physical cultures.
It really makes you rethink the history. Like many of the styles we know, Ashtanga, Iyengar, Vinyasa flow, they aren't ancient in their current form, are they?
That's a crucial takeaway. Many developed from the 1930s onwards, heavily influenced by Krishnamacharya and his students, and incorporating these other elements too. They're modern evolutions, not direct transmissions from millennia ago.
Mind blown slightly. And get this, even downward-facing dog. The sources trace it back to an 18th century Indian wrestling exercise, the elephant pose.
Huh. Yeah, it's a fascinating little piece of history. Shows how postures could be borrowed or adapted from various physical disciplines, not just pure yoga lineage sometimes.
Okay, another big shift discussed is secularization, taking the religion or spirituality out, or at least downplaying it.
That definitely happened widely in the West. The focus shifted much more towards the physical health, fitness, stress relief aspects.
Which probably made it more accessible to people who weren't looking for a spiritual path, right? Broaden the appeal.
Undoubtedly. It lowered the barrier to entry for many. But it also leads to debates about authenticity, about whether something essential gets lost.
Right, which leads us straight into the whole commercialization discussion. Because yoga is now a massive industry, isn't it? Billions of dollars.
Oh, absolutely. Studios, certifications, yoga pants, retreats, apps. It's big business. And that started fairly early, too. People like Richard Hittleman on TV in the 60s selling tons of books.
So the commercial aspect isn't brand new, but it's scaled massively.
Definitely.
And this is where the concerns about cultural appropriation come in strongly.
Yeah. The argument often is that when yoga becomes primarily a fitness commodity, stripped of its deeper philosophical context, its cultural roots, its spiritual dimensions, does it become appropriation? Is it overlooking or disrespecting the source?
Especially the focus just on the asanas, the physical poses over maybe meditation or the ethical principles.
Right. That shift in emphasis is central to the critique, that it becomes commodified, potentially losing its traditional essence in the process.
It sounds like a really complex, ongoing conversation, how to honor the roots while acknowledging how it has evolved globally.
It really is. There aren't easy answers, and there are many valid perspectives on it.
So wrapping this up, it's clear yoga's journey west wasn't simple. It went from this science of the mind,
Introduced by Vivekananda,
to becoming this huge variety of physical practices really embedded in Western ideas of fitness and well-being.
And crucially, it wasn't just the West adopting something wholesale. It was this dynamic interaction, this blending. Indian traditions met Western influences, especially gymnastics, physical culture.
Yeah, the surprising details like the gymnastics link or the origins of certain poses really drive that home. It was a two-way street, in a sense, or at least a complex fusion.
A real synthesis.
And these ongoing debates about commercialization, about cultural appropriation, they're important things for anyone involved with yoga today to think about, aren't they?
Definitely. It prompts that critical reflection on how we engage with practices from other cultures.
So maybe here's a final thought for you, the listener, to mull over. As yoga keeps evolving in the West, what do you think is the most crucial part of its heritage to hold on to? And how can individuals practice it in a way that feels personally meaningful but also genuinely respectful of where it came from?
That's a great question to ponder. Finding that balance.